I mean, what's happening in Glasgow, right? COP26 just got underway in Glasgow yesterday on Halloween. Fitting, I guess. And already, I've got this piece here, right? This is from CNN. I'll just read you the opening paragraph, and this will give you a sense of it, right? U.S. climate envoy John Kerry and his team were hoping things would look very different heading into the world's premier climate summit this week, but officials have begun downplaying expectations as clouds gather over the upcoming talks. The circumstances have led the Biden administration officials to lower expectations for the Glasgow meeting, which they are messaging more as the beginning of a long process than as the culmination of Kerry's efforts over the last 8 months. Quote, Glasgow is an important milestone as we kick off what we're calling a decisive decade of action to tackle the climate crisis, unquote, a senior administration official said this week. Quote, and this will be an opportunity for us to lay down the foundation for further action, how we ratchet up our ambition in the upcoming years after Glasgow. Right? It's almost comical, right? I mean, this is your launching point. This is your, as we're calling, where does it say that it's again? Is it the beginning of a long process? It's an important milestone as we kick off what we're calling this decade. I mean, look, it's some part of me like emphasize or empathizes with that kind of messaging, right? Because the last thing in the world you want to feel is that it's hopeless, right? I mean, the best case scenario, if we're looking at the best actors here, that their hearts are in the right place, they're trying to do the right thing, their message is such a way they're trying to hold together something that's falling apart. Right. And they're trying to kind of like hold out some hope that something is going to be accomplished. Right. But meanwhile, the science says otherwise. Right. So this, we're getting to start to see two colliding pathways, or I should say three colliding pathways. And let me just like spell them out right here. There's more, but, whatever. So the one pathway, right, is that some breakthrough happens, right? I don't know, some freaking Holy Spirit, thing happens, and all these people at this summit, right? Even though a whole lot of folks from the global South have been excluded from this summit due to COVID protocols, right? Because guess what? A lot of those countries that are going to be on the front lines of climate change don't have access to the vaccine. Right. So, hey, looks like we're going to do this again, right? So a lot of them were excluded, right? They couldn't even get like visas to get into the country. So any participation they have is remotely, right? So anyways, I'm getting off track. So let's just say there's some kind of Holy Spirit moment. And actually, not only did these folks come out and say, we've come to an agreement that we're going to do this, but they actually somehow put in teeth. Right? Miraculously, they come up with this like way to have, give teeth. I mean, I don't know how you do that. Right? But that's like, that's the best case scenario. That's what everybody really, I think everybody would love, right? If we actually just do this right. And just quit the nonsense. Let's freaking listen to what we got to do because we got a crisis here. Let's respond to it like a crisis and pull together and do this. Right? That, like, what I just described there is like right on the borderland of like the forest where unicorns are real. Okay, just want to be clear. I know, right, that. So, but there's a second line, right? So I guess there's four. The second line is we continue the process as it is. This slow process, we're going to kick off, a decade of blah, blah, blah. And it's going to be a decade of the same nonsense, right? And the only thing in that framework that is going to spur action is going to be shocks, disasters, mass deaths, all at once, right? And at some point, you'd think, okay, then they feel like they're back into a corner, so they absolutely have to respond. So that's another possibility. That's not quite on the the edge of unicorn land. That's a little bit farther in, but I think a little bit more realistic. But then, of course, you've got what we saw just happen with the pandemic, is that the ability of people to allow other people to die as long as it's not them, or as long as it fits some sort of weird freaking cult-like devotion to death, right? That's why Sean Kitchen always said the Republican Party's become a death cult. Hey, Shireen, what's up? So, you know, I'm not, I don't, you know, there's not evidence. Let's put it like this. There's not existing evidence to say that even in the absence or even in the presence of massive deaths as relate to climate or disasters related to climate, that we're going to see action, right? The one thing that might play itself out is like, you know, again, because like rich people are going to be insulated. We know this. It's only if there's going to be impacts and hard impacts that are going to hit the financial sectors and are going to hit the kind of, the wealth sectors. And, you know, that's going to be part of it. So that's one trajectory. So that's number two. Number three is radical action from below, right? This means that we start exercising our power to say no. We will say, we are going to not allow this economy to function. We are going to do the general strikes until there's climate action. You want your riches, you want your production, guess what? We're going to say no. We might produce for ourselves and for each other, but we're not producing for you. Rick Smith has always said this, right? One of the greatest powers of the worker, right, is to stick their hands in the pockets and say no, collectively. That's the pathway, that's the progressive, the left pathway. And, you know, I hesitate to even say left at this point because, I mean, that's the kind of human pathway, right? That's the one where, like, that's not even a read of the ideology of, like, what that means and where we go from there. That's just a kind of a sense of, like, how we demand action is that we say no. We don't work. You know, this is what the longshoremen have done over and over again, who offload all those ships coming from China and stuff, right? They basically come on and they say, "Look, we're going on strike. We're not unloading your ships until we get X, Y, and Z met." And that's because they said no. That's a nonviolent action. It's confrontational. It's full of conflict. It's got risk associated with it, but it's one that is a better chance of succeeding than hoping for the best. And, you know, and again, look, we don't have movements in this country, at least. That's not the case in other places around the world. But in this country, at least, we don't have a lot of muscle memory of building mass movements. We're still stuck, right? Especially like liberals and the left, like more broadly, are still like hesitant to make people uncomfortable. I'm not even talking getting in people's faces. I'm just saying like the discomfort in your social circles of saying no with your bosses, right? I mean, I could go off on a whole other trajectory about what we saw, like, you know, at Kutztown University when it came to its responses to the pandemic and responses to what they're doing to Steve Oros and other people at our campus right now. And the willingness for people to just like, okay, to not fight, to not even put on the table a refusal to work. Unless our conditions are safe, we will not go back to work. To collectively, because, you know, if I did it individually or that person did it individually or that person did it individually, they're gone. It's easy to pick off individuals. You have to do it collectively. You have to plan. You have to strategize. And that's where you get your power from, right? That's where solidarity comes from. Solidarity is that energy that helps exercise those muscles and keep you strong. And that's the kind of thing that has to happen in our workplaces. That's the kind of thing that happens in our communities. We have to say no. And to take away the very thing that they want the most, and that is the money, because that's all they care about, the money and the power. So, you know, we've had this history of like looking back at different movements, right? Whether it's the kind of like women's suffrage movement, whether it's the, you know, the anti-slavery movement, whether it's the civil rights movement, right? Whether it's a struggle for LGBTQ rights, whether it's the feminist movement, as kind of like, look at what they did. And we have pictures of them sitting down and locking arms and like that. And we champion that when it's in the past. We have to bring that all forward to the now and let it bolster us now in this fight. Because like literally our lives and our children's lives are on the line when it comes to climate crisis. And the fact that, like, I think about my place of work, right? Kutztown University, the fact you have all these buildings with big flat tops exposed to the sun all day, that those are not packed with solar panels, that should be enough right there. No solar panels, no classes. How's that? Right? I mean, seriously. I mean, at some level, it is that easy. And I understand in practice, I understand the feelings around it. I understand the hesitancy. I understand this fear. But that is what we're facing here. I mean, because like, what's the alternative, right? How many billions of people are going to be displaced? How many people will we accept as dead before general strikes start to feel like common sense? I mean, I honestly don't know what that tipping point is. I have no idea. I thought there was one time, I think several years ago, before the Trump era, that I had a feeling about what that looked like and what was people's breaking point. I mean, I thought, boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, what we've just been through in the Trump regime is. I mean, I don't know about you. I know for me, certainly, it ripped me up. I mean, there's enough struggles in our lives as it is with that. Holy crap. The brutality, the lies, the gaslighting every single day that took place. Right. And look, it was our, well, I shouldn't say it's our first. But it was, for many of us, it was our first experience with that degree of authoritarianism, right? They're really like, this is what it means to live under authoritarian regime. I think for a lot of us, it was abstract. This was real. So that's what I'm thinking. So that's something. So then we have a fourth round. So then we've got your general strikes, your mass movement, right? Your solidarity, your kind of, this is what we do. We demand action. We put our bodies on the line. The fourth one scares the crap out of me. And we've already seen these you know, snippets of this development happening now. And I'll tell you right now, this is already happening in the far right circles. You get in their chat rooms, you follow what's happening. I mean, I'm not suggesting you do this, right? There's plenty of people who do that research to read it. You don't need to go out and get into their chat rooms because it is like disturbing. I couldn't handle it too long, right? When I tried to do that one, I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. It's that third one has to do with, okay, what happens? So we stay on this trajectory. The climate heats up. More disasters start happening. Let's just say, you know, let's be conservative in our estimates. 500 million people to start are forced to flee their homes and are now migrating. Where do they go? Who lets them in? We've already seen the rise of some political parties that have been, I talked about this a little bit on the show last week, but some political parties that have started to pair nationalism, right-wing nationalism, with climate action. if you remember, there was the shooting in New Zealand, right? That mass shooting in New Zealand. One of the worst shootings in New Zealand's history, mass killings. And one of the, in that manifesto was left behind, one of the things they found, it was like this whole environmental fascism. That pairing of nationalism with climate action. Basically saying, we are going to protect ourselves, we're going to build our walls around this, and we're going to keep everyone else out. And we're going to double down on nationalism and borders. And it's just like, it's us against them. Right? That's kind of a trajectory that is not a fanciful one. It is one that is on the realm of possibilities, especially as you see these what are now fairly fringe arguments between nationalism, or on the right, but increasingly there's these experiments that are going on at different countries. I want to say one was in Denmark. I wish I could just pull it up. I was hoping I thought I had it right here in my pile of stuff, but I don't. That's scary, because what it does is it basically takes a component of what we already have, right? You think about this country, for example. Like, if you think of this, it's going to be like, who's the us and them in this country, right? It's not like all Americans. It's never been all Americans, right? It's going to be those rich folks paired with their white supremacist thugs and their police and military things, especially the police forces, right, that have been militarized, right? They're going to draw the boundaries and the walls, put the walls around their areas, what they care about. The rest of us be damned. I talked about this on the show like kind of a while ago now. I mean, it's been a while ago, but I said it's the zombie model, right? I mean, the way that these people perceive, say, that kind of mass migration, the way that they perceive us, right, if we have to flee, to them, the rich, the white supremacists, the folks that are kind of like, with the, militarized police, the Blue Lives Matter people, all that stuff, they see us as the zombies. We are the hordes that are trying to get in the compound. Right? It disturbs the hell out of me is that I can't tell you how many ads I get, on my phone or on my Twitter scroll account or whatever. Like, I don't even play video games and I get all these so you scroll all this stuff and there's like all these zombie killing games, right? You see like you are your lens, right? You are put in the position of the one who has to push back on the zombies. All those people like trying to scale the walls and get into this, right? I mean, dystopian sci-fi is built around these tropes too as well. Well, but in most of those movies or in those games, you're asked to put yourself on the inside of the compound, right? In reality, the vast majority of us are on the outside of the compound. And they'll call us zombies. They'll call us whatever they need to do in order to separate us out. How do we know this? Well, because we've done it before, right? It is built into the genetic code of this country, right? The genocide of the kind of like indigenous peoples of this country, right? Slavery, hundreds of years of slavery, the us versus them. Heather McGee's got a great book called The Sum of Us, who goes through some of this logic as it's kind of built into American ideology, right? What it means in a very practice, right? The way that she talks about it is that, look, we've been told it's the kind of like, it's the what does she call it? It's basically like, it's the zero-sum game. Yes, sorry, I couldn't pull it up. It's like a zero-sum game, right? If this group over here gets something, it must be taking it from me. right? That has been a logic that has been racialized and has been utilized and deployed by the people in power as a way to kind of split and separate people out. And she does a great job historically of actually breaking down where this is actually legislated, particularly in Virginia. Like, I didn't know. I think I talked about this on the show once too. I had no idea that there was a period. There's a period, I forget when. I wanted to say it's probably 1600s or before the War of Independence, where white indentured servants and servitors and white and poor white folks band together with enslaved blacks, right, and rose up against the power structure and burnt Richmond to the ground. Right? I have no idea. Like, it's just like, what? Right? And that actually happened in our history, right? And so what did they do afterwards? One of the first things they did, they learned from it. The people in power learned from that. And then after that, they started writing into law, I'm going to give these white people, these poor white people, a little bit of cultural capital over, and some material things, very small material things, to show that, so that they can feel that they're better than those black folks. And they started legislating this stuff over time. Right? So that's built into our code here, right? In terms of as an option. Doesn't mean that this isn't kind of like a genetic determinism thing. That's more like, that's the option. That's a trajectory that's built into our cultural narratives, right? So they will do that. They will play the zombie game with us, right? That is the environmental fascism part of this stuff, which we got to address. So those are my concerns, right? So now, I do have to say that, what you saw with the Biden's package about the latest spending bill, about $555 billion, it's not nearly enough, but it's better than I first thought, which is a good thing. I listened to, say, Bill McKibben he was on Rachel Maddow last week, and kind of like talked me down off my ledge a little bit, but because it basically squared with kind of like, I think where I was thinking about this is that, look, it is significant what's in that bill if it ever passes. However, it's not nearly enough, right? So it is a good thing. It is the largest investment in the kind of history. But the problem is that it just leaves all the incentives and takes away the stick, gives all the carrots and no stick. So there's no penalties for breaking away from that. There's no penalties to continue to use fossil fuels, right? It's just kind of encouraging people, right? Which, again, is fan. And one of the biggest things that, was kind of left out of it was this, oh God, where was that one thing? This is Lee's Lies of Featherstone's piece. Yeah, here it is. This thing, it was the Clean Electricity Payment Program. Basically would have had these direct incentives, but also would have had a stick connected with it. That was considered to be the hallmark piece of Biden's Build Back Better bill that would have been jump-started a whole bunch of stuff when it comes to the response to climate. And that was taken out. So Bill McKibben was kind of pointing about that. So look, I mean, I didn't even need to go this far on the climate stuff tonight, but it's like it's really, really significant towards where we go next.